Hey, it's Don, the Art Professor. Today we're going to take some comic books, just some random comic books. I wouldn't use good ones, and we're going to turn it into this, which is a pop-up card. You can use it as a greeting card. You can even do postcards out of pop-ups as well. This is nothing more than some pages out of an old comic book that have been glued down to cardstock and that have been cut out. That's it. Just takes a little bit of imagination and eye for something that would look unique. Obviously the backing here is just from another page from the very same comic book. And then these are a couple of different pages, a gatefold section, that have been glued on for a cover or an outside to this. They're very sturdy, they're very stiff. You can use old children's books as well. I could have added like a happy birthday logo on the top using the very same construction method that I used to make this part of it, but just add another word at a different level. I could add something being held in front like happy birthday Dave, happy birthday John, whatever you would want. You can make them any size you want. You can make them a standard size so you can put them in a normal envelope that you can buy from the store. Now you can buy greeting card envelopes in boxes of 10, 25, 100, 500, 1,000 and make your own and send them out as gifts. You can also sell these to other folks so they can send them out to collectors of a certain line of comic books. If somebody has a big Spider-Man fan and they want to get them something unique, this would be a perfect example. A pop-up made from a comic book that they may like. Now again, you don't want to take high dollar comic books. This is for something for those everyday ones, maybe worth $1 or $2. It's just not worth very much. This is something really unique that will make someone very happy. But let's show you how we made this. Okay, so we just start with the page from the comic book. I'm going to take some white stock paper, just a little thicker, and some 3-in-1 glue. This stuff dries really quick. They sell it at Walmart. And we're going to glue the paper, the pages, the cutout part, and the background part to one of these sheets. Again, 3-in-1 glue we're going to use for this. Readily available, dries clear. This is where it came out of, too. We've taken all the pages from Battle of the Planets. This was falling apart, so I took the pages from this. Wasn't worth anything in the condition it was in, but it's got a lot of cool artwork that I can chop up or do stuff with. We're just going to glue it to the back of the cardstock, just like I said. Now, I use a lot to make sure that there's no separations. This piece here we're going to have to cut out, so it's got to be glued pretty much all over. So when we cut it out, there aren't going to be any loose spots in it at all. I go in both directions with the glue to make a checkerboard pattern. That's honestly the best way that I have personally found to make sure you get everything. Just be careful when you go to glue it onto the cardstock. You want to make sure you have it somewhere where it's straight, where you can have this straight and not have to cut every single edge around it. We're going to cut this piece out here once it's been dried onto this stock sheet here, this cardstock. You want to get all the wrinkles out. We're going to chop it down a little bit with the paper cutter real quick first so it's a little easier to manage. And then we'll cut it out from there. These paper cutters you can get at Walmart. They're like $15. I use them all the time. Just make sure we got everything in there and add it in correctly. You don't want to cut off any extra because we want as much of the figures as we can get. These cutters work great too. If you've never used one, I use them all the time. Then we're going to take scissors to start, and where we can't get in with the scissors, we are going to use an X-Acto blade. Just want to be careful so you don't mess this up. You have some time invested into it, obviously. You can see how much was cut off. If you do it right, you won't even be able to tell that you use scissors, basically. We're going to have to cut part of this down, too. I usually just keep it large and then cut it down to the size after I have trimmed it out. It gives you extra room. We're just going to kind of eyeball it where we want it to be on here. We're going to pull out the background after we figure that out and just whack off the bottom. If you use the paper cutter, it'll be straight. It'll be right the way you want it, just like that. So there's the cutoff and the inside here. We're going to have to make the supports next. With the supports, I'm going to use black stock paper, cardstock. Same basic thing as the white, but we're going to use black. That way it won't show up very much. You could have used black for the back of the figures, the part we actually cut out as well. Now these supports look like little I-beams, and it's double the thickness. I take one piece and I fold it in half, and we use those half sections to make some flaps. Just kind of make sure on height, we're going to just eyeball it to make sure the height is correct. We're going to need 3 of these supports, and they need to be exactly the same so that the floating piece will float at the exact same height, and it will fold and close inside the card correctly. You glue them each together again, 3-in-1 glue. Walmart, it's like $6 I think at Walmart, the glue. You can't go wrong with that. Now I've folded these in half, and if you need a guide, I would say using a ruler, measure it off correctly and mark dead center on both pieces, and then fold very carefully so you don't ruin the artwork on this. So as you can see, I've got it folded very nicely here, and the first support is going to go literally at the fold. That's the very first, most important piece you need to glue in there. You're going to eyeball it first, of course. Make sure you have it in the right spot. And we're going to firmly allow that to sit and dry. Now this 3-in-1 glue, in just a couple minutes, I can move on to the next step. That's why I use this glue. It dries clear, as I said before. It's just an awesome glue. I use it all the time, pretty much for paper, things like this. I don't like waiting for like the old Elmer's school glue days, so this stuff is the greatest. Now the floating piece, the characters themselves, are going to be glued first to that center post. But we want to make sure that everything's lined up correctly, so we're going to double check all of it and then glue the other supports in position as well. They want to be hidden, so we're going to put them right where it's going to be less visible. You just need basically 3 supports for something like this. Now we're going to show you how to do all kinds of other cards just like this. Postcards, mechanical postcards for Halloween is what I'm working on for this coming up year. So you're going to see how to construct them, order them, buy them, and the whole works. Now on this one, I just make sure all the glue is off. If you're careful with this glue, you can get it all off and have just a perfect looking finished product. With taking this comic like this, it looks literally professional, every bit of it, because the comic book art is just so good and clear on these newer glossy covered ones. This is the last of the 3 supports. You have one at the center fold that folds with it, and then one on either side to hold this up. You'll have to judge on where these go. Now, you can do any character, anything you want. Children's magazines as well will work great for this. Again, as I said, the first piece you want to glue on is the center piece. This is the most important part, is putting this together right here. Because if you get glue in the wrong spot, you could glue it shut, or many other things could happen. So take your time to line this up. Make sure it's on there firmly. Again, this stuff tacks really quickly, so it'll grab once you line it up. You want to make sure that the very bottom of your pop-up part, the floating piece, lines up with the bottom of the card, because it's pretty hard to cut these once it's glued, and you really don't want to have to unassemble this. Then we're going to put glue on the other 2 we didn't touch, but not connect them to the floating character section. We're going to do that after we fold it flat. So we're going to go and put glue both ends. Be very careful that you don't touch the floating characters with the support beams until you're ready. Get enough on there. You want it to stick the first time. You don't want this to be messed up on that. Then we're going to fold the supporting beams down to the side of the card, keeping the glue facing up. This is the trickiest part of the whole thing. And then carefully push down the characters onto those supporting mounts. If you put just the right amount of glue on there, it won't stick to the back of the card, and you've finished it correctly. So give it a second. You're going to pull up too before it has time to totally dry to make sure that it's not going to stick down below it. Again, this, as I said, is the trickiest part of this whole thing right here. And it looks like we've got it on this shot. Usually if you've done this a few times, it's pretty easy. You know exactly what you're doing. And you can see it's now floating. Now, I don't close the card right away. I wait till the glue is fully dry before I close the card. We're just going to push it in, make sure everything is on firmly, as you can see. And then any glue that may have squeezed out, I also clean that off too. I was very careful, so I have nothing extra on this. So we just need to let it dry now, and we're going to move on to the next one there. See, it only takes a couple minutes to dry. It's been maybe a minute and a half or so, and I'm able to fold it already. Now you want to firmly fold it to make sure that this is going to function as you wish. You can see I got a little glue on the back side, but we're going to cover this anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's one reason I don't put the back side on first. Now I took 2 more pages out of the very same comic book that have the G-Force logo on them, and we're going to glue these onto the outside where the white is. Now, I never put the seam, if I'm going to put 2 different pages for the outside of this, where it folds, because it'll be weak and sometimes you get to see some white on there. So I'm going to overspray this, overfold it across to both sides, this one sheet, just part of it. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute here. Again, checkerboard pattern on the glue. You want to make sure this is on there really well. You don't want it pulling off later on. Lining this up again, this is the hardest part, would be lining this up to make sure it's in the right spot. We're going to come back in with the paper cutter and then cut off all the excess paper, which you will see in just a second here. Make sure it's on there firm. You don't want anything messed up. You don't need any bubbles or air pockets. This works very well this way. That's why I put the checkerboard. Once you get it in contact and you push hard enough, it will push out all the air bubbles if you've done it right. Now we're going to chop off the extra. This is a little tricky, but once you've done it a few times as well, it's pretty easy just to use it. You can do it by hand, but the paper cutter is so much easier and so straight and level. It'll just have a professional finish if you use a paper cutter like this. When I'm finished with these, they look like you bought them in a store, in all honesty. Anybody can do these. This is just something fun. Adults, I would say, would be for 17 years and older for these types of things. Use paper cutters and some other things that a child obviously should not be using. So all my videos are for adults only. This is for somebody trying to make money in the first place. This is something that I have sold and you can sell for many different things, even on eBay or any of these sites here. As you see, I've overcut the piece and we're going to glue it onto both sides, just a little strip, so that the seam of the last piece, the last page, isn't at the fold line. You don't want that. You want a solid fold. This will help keep it rigid, and the card will last much longer this way also. Now, I use the mat itself to help turn the piece of paper over to make sure that it's properly seated and there's no air pockets. This makes it look really professional. This is a key to it. And then we line up the last piece. And again, lining this up is probably the hardest part, and with just a little overlap too, I would say, on this. May not be perfect on the image, but it will cover up the entire thing. It'll look much more finished, like a store-bought product. The big thing on this one is it looks like a store-bought product because basically all the surfaces are from a highly well-printed comic book. Now, you can use older comic books that aren't as glossy as this, but it just doesn't come out as well. There are some tricks you can do to make it look a little glossy as well, but we'll cover those in another video. And again, we're going to have a bunch more videos coming out on how to do many other things just like this as well. But that's the finished card.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully that gave you some ideas. Again, just comic books into a pop-up. You can make them many different ways. We're going to be doing several more videos on showing you how to do all kinds of different pop-ups, as well as mechanical postcards that I will be producing, and you'll get to see them from start to finish to the finished product till I actually list and start selling those same postcards. So you can use these for Halloween cards, Christmas cards. You can do all kinds of stuff for these. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.